I have not made a video in a long time. I mean, at least what I consider to be a long time. So I'm going to take a look at, in this video, a bunch of the information regarding the development updates for the update coming to Marvel's Avengers later in March. And one of the reasons why I didn't even make a video on it so far is because, honestly, it just wasn't a lot for the first 2 weeks at least. But this past week, it looks like they gave us more information. So if you enjoy this video today, feel free to like and subscribe for future Marvel content. So the first thing I'm going to take a look at is the weekly blog number 78. I believe this is the latest that I left off on, but I should say I didn't report on it before. And the reason being is because it's simply like not super serious. I mean, it's cool, right? So they're going to have this new veto system. I'm not going to read this thing word for word, but they're going to have basically a new type of veto system that is very, I mean, from what I've read, is very similar already to what we have in place, to how, like, if someone wants to return to Quinjet, someone can veto it, but there's going to be more options, so you can actually, like, vote to kick a player out, and it just seems like they're making everything more kind of vote-based so that more people of the team might be with it. But, I mean, the biggest thing from this is that you'll have the ability to kick a player out. That seems like the newest thing to me, because the return to Quinjet, reload checkpoint, select mission and stuff like that, and to like interact with the story and stuff, all that basically seems like, you know, what's already in place. You can already veto returning to Quinjet, you can already veto reloading checkpoint, you can already veto a mission, and you can already choose to skip a story cutscene and stuff like that. So that's not like too new to me, unless I'm misunderstanding this, but I mean, it seems pretty straightforward. So the newest thing to that is that you'll be able to kick a player out, which, you know, is definitely a good feature to have for someone who might just join the game and they might just be AFK for the whole time just for the rewards and stuff like that. So the next thing that I didn't cover was the weekly blog number 79. And when it comes to weekly blog number 79, again, not a lot of information in here. They're just basically saying that in the update, they are going to standardize names for different pieces of gear to make it easier to understand. So like the word heavyweight on a piece of gear is going to denote a heavy combo finisher, and they're just going to condense certain skills to have the same name when they already had like the same effect. So I mean, the example they gave here, and I actually experienced this firsthand, is here's a hero specific example. Captain America had Rally Cry Safeguard and Rally Cry Bulwark as potential perks on his gear. Both Safeguard and Bulwark increased defense when Rally Cry was active. The same exact effect, two different names. So I got a piece of Elite gear with Cap that actually had both of these different perks on it. They both give 15% increased defense, or damage reduction, I should say, when Rally Cry is active. So I have both of these perks on one piece of gear, and I was actually curious as to why they're two different names, but they were the same effect. Obviously, it didn't bother me, but that's the point that they're getting at, is they're making it more standardized across the board with gear. So, I mean, it's small change, but, you know, it might be a good quality of life thing to experience down the line. Okay, the next thing I did not cover was the reworking hero set blog from March 4th. So they talk about the classic power set in this, right? The classic power set is apparently what the name is for the hero set pieces of gear that you can potentially get from the Hive. So I'm assuming that's Hives and the Elite Heroic Hive, those exotics that elude people from the Elite Heroic Hive, myself included. I'm assuming that's what they meant, because they said these are the ones available from the Hives. So they said previously the legendary pieces of this set could only be found in Elite Hives and still be found in Hives. After Update 2.3, these will also replace the hero set normally found from villain sectors. Normal villain sector mission chains will drop a single piece. Elite villain sector mission chain will drop 2 pieces, the typical attack defense split, with a chance to drop an exotic piece, which is the first time these will be available. Normal and elite villain sectors will drop this set with every run and have a small chance at the exotic versions, but the daily and weekly mission chains have a higher chance. So this is like really good, right? Especially, like, I've been trying, specifically for Kate Bishop, I've been trying to get her exotic ranged piece from the Elite Heroic Hive for, I mean, a long time now. So, I mean, having an extra layer of chance to get that type of piece for these heroes, I think is a really, really good decision. So then they talk about some of the changes to the classic power set coming in update 2.3, and I mean, I'm not going to read every single one of these pieces of gear out because they seem pretty self-explanatory, but I will say just from these, I'll show them in the video right now, but just from these descriptions of what they're potentially changing in these gear sets, it's clear that they're just trying to balance the game out, which again, you know, it's neither here nor there for me at this point. I've always been a fan of you don't really need a balance when it's a PvE game, not a PvP game. But I also understand what they're trying to do because it clearly looks like they're trying to up maybe what would be considered more of a support build. Because obviously right now, and basically since the dawn of the game's existence, the damage buff meta has been what precedes everything else. So they're clearly trying to bring more support in it, which is absolutely fine. So I'll be interested to see how some of these builds turn out. Okay, full disclosure, this is the first time that I'm reading all of this, so I'm actually going to backtrack on what I said slightly. So the previous set, the classic power set, they said it was available from hives, which I assumed included the elite heroic hive, but it looks like that's not true because now it goes on to talk about the technical power set, and it says the technical power set is originally what you would get from the vaults, which you can still get from vaults. But it said this includes the exotic versions, which before were only previously awarded from last Avengers standing. So I'm going to go ahead and read the location of these real quick. So the legendary versions will still be found in vaults, but will also come from vault mission chains. Gone is the need to hunt for vault coordinates. The shield mission giver will offer one vault mission per day, while one elite vault mission chain will appear weekly on the usual Thursday reset. So I'll circle back to that idea. The Elite Vault mission chains will now award 2 pieces from this set, attack, defense, split, with a chance to drop the exotic variants. The exotics were previously only rewarded from last Avengers standing. So these are the exotics that are only rewarded from the Elite Heroic Hive. Each completion of a vault will only earn you one of these pieces, but the mission chains have a much higher chance of dropping the exotic. Now, I will say the reason why I kind of paused earlier, I don't know how I feel about vaults being a daily and elite vaults being a weekly. It makes, I guess, partial sense for the rewards that you could get from it now, but again, the whole time locking thing to get certain pieces of gear, I don't really understand it. I know if you're on like PlayStation and stuff, you can save scum, so you can like keep reloading your save state if you don't get what you want. But still, it's just kind of, I've never personally been a huge fan of it, but I digress. I can at least say I understand the choice that they're making in that. So just taking a brief look at the gear perks that they're changing for the technical power set. So as well, just from the classical power set as well, it looks not the exact same in terms of perks, but it looks like they're trying to get the similar thing across, is that they're trying to up the kind of support lab that you might be able to get with some of these people now. I will definitely say some things that I'm finding that look really good is I just saw a perk for Black Widow that basically when you have a chance of defeating an enemy to activate, you have a chance of when you defeat an enemy to automatically activate Black Widow's invisibility. That's really cool. I saw a similar one with Hulk that I don't know if they listed in this blog, but I saw a similar one with Hulk where it was when you had a chance of defeating enemies to activate Bone Shaker. So the type of lab that you could potentially get looks like it's really good, especially because I saw another one down there for Hulk that talks about when Bone Shaker is active, you have increased heroic charge rate and health regeneration. So I mean, overall, these perks are all looking like a plus. I have no complaints about what I'm seeing from the perks whatsoever. So for this last weekly blog, well, I should say for the last part of this weekly blog, they talk about the Apex power set, which you could get before from priority missions and flashback missions. And looking at the gear changes they had for this, for the perks, honestly, I'm surprised at some of these because they're just really good. So, I mean, it looks, so one of a couple of them stood out to me, honestly. So, the first one that stood out to me was for Miss Marvel. It says Storm Ranger's, Storm Ranger's Nega Bands. So, replaced status damage while polymorphed with Embiggen Destruction, which increases stun, status, and overall damage while Embiggen is active. That's really good. Like, that's really, really good, considering Embiggen, in my opinion, is already pretty OP for a high heroic build, especially. I see another cool one with Black Widow where she has a chance of casting Vanish in Smoke when taking damage. That's pretty cool. Captain America, it looks like they're changing a Brooklyn Brawler extension to go from 3 to 8.5 seconds. For Iron Man, so this one with Iron Man stood out to me a lot too. Replaced Rampant Assistant with Arc Overload Assistance, which grants a second Arc Overload charge. That is really good to me too. I'm seeing a lot of good things from the changes to the Apex gear, so I'm excited for this. And then another one that looked really good with Thor is that replace generic heroic regeneration perk with Rampant Lethal Extension, which extends Warrior's Fury duration for each enemy defeated. And I mean, Thor's already OP, so you'll be able to stay basically in Warrior's Fury the whole time, it looks like. I mean, all that is really, really cool. So that's all the information coming to the 3 different, I guess you can call them power sets now instead of the hero sets. So this looks like the changes to coming to the power sets. So the last thing I'm going to take a look at is the most recent weekly blog from March 10th. So this is yesterday. So I'm probably going to read most of this word for word because I just read over it and it does have a lot of interesting things in it. So buffs. So melee and certain heroics are in a state where they are not enticing enough to most players in many combat systems. This is a combination of the threat of heavy damage from enemies in melee range, lack of perks that increase heavy damage, the lack of easy status effect application for melee, and the ease of ranged combat to do all those things. So I'm not going to read the rest of this first paragraph word for word, but they said the makeup for that is they're going to like have a blanket change for most melee perks. So like they're going to increase percentage from damage perks, buff durations, adding status types to certain signature attacks for Kate Bishop and Miss Marvel and stuff like that. So, I mean, it looks like they're trying to make melee a lot more viable, which I can definitely appreciate. So I'm going to go down to changes. The comic adjustment was not only required to prevent damage nullification, but was also important in preparing for the introduction of many defensive perks, which are coming in to making melee a less risky, more rewarding endeavor as touched on above. I mean, I could talk about them nerfing the comics all day, but that's neither here nor there at this point. Comics allowed players to passively have comparable armor to those who sacrifice DPS for perks and stats dedicated to defense. So this whole thing, they're basically saying that they didn't like that people didn't have to worry about defense for the comic book buff, which I mean, it's true, people didn't have to worry about defense, but that's also why people liked it so much, is that they didn't have to sacrifice their attack. But it also looks like they're trying to buff attack in this article. Like they said, they're going to add might as a potential stat to a heroic slot's possible attributes, which I mean, that alone, in my opinion, especially when you get to the higher levels, like to 175 and stuff, that will make a difference to melee players. So that's like, that will make a difference. I'm definitely interested in seeing that. So now they talk about adjustments when it comes to the damage buff and stuff. Now, I'm not going to lie, I'm not mad at the adjustments they're talking about for the damage buff. So the most obvious is the damage increase of 65% to all attacks, including heroic attacks. There's very little in the game that can meet this level of damage increase. So it talks about that the damage buff in its current state increases the damage, it increases the critical damage, and it increases the stun damage that you're doing while it's active. So they said what they're going to do to kind of mitigate some of the things the damage buff currently does is they're going to remove the critical chance and the impact, the stun impact from the damage buff. So they said the 65% damage increase will remain and its duration will not be changed. And then they go on to talk about the Norn Stone of Lethal Will, and this is what I thought was like a good idea to even things out too. So the Norn Stone of Lethal Will's buff, which stacks with damage buff, will retain its impact increasing mechanic, but will no longer add a 35% critical chance to all attacks. This gives the Norn Stone unique capability when compared to its standard counterpart. The damage buff from the Norn Stone of Lethal Will has been increased from 35% to 45%, and its duration will be increased by 2 seconds. The passive critical hit increase from the Norn Stone will also increase from 5 to 10%. This means that with both buffs active, players will be able to see a 105 increase in overall damage, but to sustain the buffs, like before, they will need to build into proficiency and critical chance. So I honestly don't mind this whatsoever. I think because they're giving you back a normal higher damage percent output when you have both of those active, but they're just taking away kind of the increased critical chance. Not damage, mind you, because when they say the damage buff applies to critical hits. They're just talking about the straight damage. So like the 65% increased damage, that just also applies to critical damage. So they're not taking away critical damage. They're taking away a higher critical chance, which when you get higher in level and you level up your character, you're going to inherently, in my opinion, get that critical chance back anyway. So it's not the biggest of deals. But that about wraps up what I'm seeing for all of the stuff that I haven't been able to cover within the past couple weeks. I'm really, really liking what this update has in store for us. It's not anything like incredibly big, like a new hero or the raid or anything like that, but I like it when they do updates like this because it's a lot of quality of life stuff and the game feels refreshed and rejuvenated when you come back to it. So I'm definitely excited for when this drops later in March. Comment down below if you're excited to see these changes implemented as well, and I appreciate you for watching the video.